I should have listened to Rule, for the first night I heard my name drifting across the empty pumps. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even threatening. It just sounded like someone who knew me, someone standing only a few feet behind me. But the pumps were empty. The highway was empty. And at 1:17 a.m., there shouldn't have been anyone out there except me and the dust blowing across the concrete. Rule 4 was simple. If someone calls your name from the dark, do not respond, no matter what voice they use. Simple until it's your own name echoing through the night. I was standing behind the counter when it happened, checking the expiration dates on a row of protein bars out of pure boredom. This place wasn't a gas station. It was a forgotten box of flickering lights glued to the side of a dying highway. Even the crickets didn't bother showing up anymore. It felt like the world had decided Highway 22 wasn't worth the noise. The first night is always the quietest. At least, that's what Dollars, the manager, told me. "You'll be fine," she said while handing me the laminated rules. "Just follow these." She didn't smile when she said it. She didn't blink much either. And she made me read every rule out loud before she left. There are 10 rules, but I didn't understand any of them. I laughed at Rule 3. If a customer asks for pump 7, refuse. There is no pump 7. I even asked Dollars jokingly, "What happens if they insist?" She just looked at me and said, "Don't find out." That was when I realized these weren't jokes. These weren't suggestions. They were a survival manual. The previous night shift worker, Mark, had quit suddenly. No 2-week notice. No explanation. Just left his uniform in a plastic bag behind the dumpster and stopped answering his phone. Dollars didn't talk about him, but the locals did. "Working nights at 22 will mess with your head," one regular told me while buying beer. "Lights flicker, clocks freeze, and you'll hear things that know you." I laughed it off then. But at 1:17 a.m., when I first heard someone whisper my name from the pumps, that laugh died in my throat. The voice was soft, too soft. Like someone trying not to wake a sleeping baby. "Evan." My name floated across the concrete like a breath caught in wind. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't turn my head. Rule 4 drilled itself into my skull. Do not respond. But every instinct in me wanted to call back. Say hello. Say who's there. Say what do you want. Instead, I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles whitened. Cold sweat slithered down my spine. The store lights flickered. Just for half a second. But the hum changed tone, a lower vibration like the place itself held its breath. Then again. Evan. This time the voice came from the left. Near pump 3. Then from behind me. Near the stockroom. But the door was locked. I had the only key. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might punch a hole through my ribs. Dust swirled outside under the harsh canopy lights, but nothing moved. No shadows. No customer. Nothing. Then the voice changed. It wasn't soft anymore. Wasn't familiar. It was my mother's voice. Evan Swady opened the door for me. The words slid under the glass door like cold air. It sounded exactly like her. But my mother lived 2 states away. Asleep. Save. This wasn't her. I stepped back. My pulse thundered in my ears. Rule 1 flashed in my mind. Keep the door locked after 11:59 p.m. Do not open it for anyone. The handle twitched. Just once, like a finger tapping it. A gentle metallic click echoed through the store. I froze. I swear the air changed, thicker, heavier, like something stood on the other side of the door. I whispered, barely audible. Don't respond, don't respond. Then another voice called my name. My own, Levin. This time it came from behind me, inside the store. And that's when I realized two things at once. The rules are not optional. Something here is very good at pretending to be human. The pumps stayed empty. The night stayed still. But whatever called my name from the dark was patient. And it wasn't leaving. And that's when I understood what Mark wrote at the bottom of his abandoned rule sheet. It learns you fast. If your new job came with strange rules, would you follow them or quit on the spot? Stay close, things only get darker from here. I didn't expect my life to fall apart quietly, but it did. No explosion, no dramatic exit, just a slow, grinding collapse until I ended up taking the only job that didn't require a background check, references, or anyone who cared enough to ask why I needed night shifts in the middle of nowhere. Highway 22 wasn't even a real destination. It was a stretch of forgotten asphalt slicing through empty land, linking two towns everyone pretended they didn't come from. And stuck right in the dead center of it was the gas station, 22 Gas and General, a rusted, flickering box surrounded by miles of silence. My father passed after the breakup. After losing the warehouse job that kept me barely afloat, I needed something, anything, that paid just enough to keep the lights on. When Dolores called me about the night shift opening, she didn't ask questions. She didn't even look at me long. Just slid the laminated rule sheet across the counter like she was handing over a confession she didn't want to read aloud. You follow these, she said. Why, I asked. She blinked slow because the last guy didn't. That was all. I learned more from locals than from her. The first week before my official start, I drove by to get a feel for the place. A mechanic named Rob was filling up at one of the pumps, wiping his hands on a rag that looked older than he was. When I mentioned I'd be working nights, his eyes tightened. Tell Dolores you want days. It's a night position. Exactly, he muttered. What does that mean? He leaned against his truck, staring out at the endless dark stretching beyond the station. Some places ain't meant to be open at night, and some things ain't meant to be seen. I laughed a little because what else do you do when someone says something like that? But Rob didn't laugh back. He just got in his truck, locked the doors from the inside, and drove away without another word. The gas station itself was a relic. A cracked Coca-Cola sign hung lopsided above the dusty windows. The neon open sign buzzed like it was clinging to its last seconds of life. The interior smelled like old mops and microwave burritos. The shelves were stocked with expired snacks, off-brand cereal, oil cans, and a few things that looked like they'd been there since before I was born. Every light inside hummed just slightly off-pitch. Not loud, but enough to irritate the back of my skull. My first walkthrough during the day was uneventful. Dolores kept everything businesslike as she showed me the basics: register, lockbox, stockroom, freezer, cleaning supplies, closing paperwork. But she didn't show me the security system. She didn't show me the back lot. She didn't show me the bathroom hallway. Every time I asked a question, she'd answer with just enough information to be technically helpful, but not enough to be reassuring. What I noticed most was what she didn't say. She never mentioned Mark, the night shift guy who quit. She never mentioned the cameras. She never mentioned the rules beyond forcing me to read them aloud. But the way she looked at me, the tightness in her jaw, the way she kept glancing at the windows, even while the sun was shining, made me feel like I'd said yes to something I should have run from. Behind the counter, taped under the register drawer, I found a note written in shaky handwriting. Just one line. Don't let it learn your voice. I didn't know what that meant then, I do now. The highway outside the station was barren, stretching endlessly in both directions. Not many cars passed during the day, and even fewer at night. At sunset, the landscape looked like someone drained the color from the world, leaving only grays, reds, and the fading gold of the sun dying behind the hills. Wind pushed dust across the pumps, swirling it around the concrete like restless spirits searching for someone to cling to. The store had a small back room that served as a break area, if you could call a stained chair, an unplugged mini fridge, and a flickering fluorescent bulb a break area. The walls were lined with old newspapers and scribbled phone numbers. Someone had scratched a deep groove into the table, over and over, as if they spent hours trapped there trying not to lose their mind. But the oddest thing was the notebook I found wedged behind the propane cage outside. The cover was warped from sun and rain, and half the pages were stuck together, but the first legible sentence on the inside made my stomach twist. If you're reading this, I didn't quit. It had to be Mark's. Nobody else worked nights long enough to leave a message like that. He listed his own set of rules, not the official laminated ones, but a personal list of observations scribbled in panic. Things like, don't look between pump 3 and 4 after midnight, it won't be empty. If something taps on the freezer door, go to the bathroom and lock yourself in. Never wipe the security screens clean, they show more dirt when something's close. If something knocks from the back alley, turn off the lights and stay still. If you hear your footsteps echo behind you, that's not your echo. None of these matched the laminated rules Dollars gave me. Which meant either Mark went mad, or the rules weren't enough. I tried asking Dollars about Mark when I started my second shift. Mark, she repeated, as if tasting the name for the first time. Yeah, the guy before me. She turned slowly, meeting my eyes with a look that didn't belong on someone working in customer service. We don't talk about him. Why not? He didn't follow the rules. That was it. No explanation. No emotion. Just the truth spoken like a warning carved into stone. The more I looked at the rules, the official ones and the ones Mark wrote, the more I realized the gas station wasn't just dangerous. It was organized in its danger, structured, predictable in the way a predator is predictable, patterns, habits, ways it hunts. And then there was the bathroom hallway. The first night I walked past it too quickly. Something felt wrong about it. The lights never fully illuminated the far end. It stayed shadowed, like a corner the building refused to acknowledge, and the air back there was always a few degrees colder. I don't know what I expected when I started working here. Ghost stories, maybe. Some creepy customers, maybe wildlife, but not this. Not rules that felt like they were written for survival. Not the feeling of being watched even when the store looked empty. Not the knowledge that someone before me didn't quit, they disappeared. And definitely not a gas station that seemed to breathe at night, stretching and shrinking in the dark like it had a pulse. By the end of my first official shift, I realized something simple and horrifying. You don't survive Highway 22 because you're brave. You survive because you obey. The rule sheet wasn't long, but it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. Laminated, creased at the corners, stained with fingerprints that weren't mine. The kind of fingerprints left by hands shaking too hard to grip paper normally. I sat behind the counter during my orientation shift, the buzzing lights dimming slightly overhead, and forced myself to read every sentence. Dollars watched me the entire time, not like a manager checking a new worker, but like someone watching a condemned man read his execution instructions. Her eyes followed every flicker of my expression, as if waiting to see which line would break me. The rules were printed in neat, blocky text, clinical, almost sterile, but the content didn't match the formatting. Some rules felt logical, others unhinged, and some felt like they were written by someone who'd stared too long into something human beings weren't supposed to recognize. I realized quickly that these weren't workplace guidelines. They were survival instructions for something that didn't belong in this world. Rule 1: do not acknowledge anyone who enters between 12:13 a.m. and 12:29 a.m. Not don't serve them. Not don't look them in the eyes. Just do not acknowledge them. Dollars didn't elaborate, but the handwritten note in the margin, definitely Mark's, said, "They're not customers, they're not people, they're checking for something." Rule 2: if the phone rings more than twice, unplug it immediately. The phone was an old landline, yellowed and cracked. Dollars warned me never to answer it. "Who calls?" I asked. She didn't blink. "No one who uses phones." Rule 3: pump 5 should always be empty after midnight. If a vehicle parks there, turn off all lights and hide behind the counter until it leaves. There were only 4 pumps. Pump 5 didn't exist. When I pointed this out, Dollars said, "You'll understand when you see it." Rule 4: if someone asks for directions to the gravel road, lie. even if you know it, especially if you know it. Highway 22 didn't have a gravel road. At least not one visible in daylight. Rule 5, the bathroom mirror sometimes reflects movement that isn't happening. Ignore it. Never turn around until you're back in the main store. This one bothered me the most. It wasn't the rule, it was the casualness of the wording, like this was a daily inconvenience, not supernatural horror. Rule 6, if the security camera labeled Cam 4 shows static, do not go outside. There were only 3 cameras. The monitor had only 3 slots. Cam 4 shouldn't exist. But the old CRT monitor had a dead space in the corner, like a blank box waiting for something to appear. Rule 7, between 3:00 and 3:31 a.m. someone will knock on the storage door. Do not speak, do not move, do not breathe loudly. If you make any sound, they will know. The storage door had no lock, no handle, just a thick wooden frame with deep scratches where someone else had once tried to claw their way out or in. Rule 8, if you hear your name called from the freezer, turn off the lights and count backwards from 50. They lose interest in the dark. This one was underlined, not typed, scratched in with a pen so violently that it ripped the laminate. Rule 9, never take your eyes off the highway. If traffic stops completely, close the store and hide until movement resumes. Stops how? I asked. Dollar's jaw tightened. It'll make sense, you'll know the moment it happens. Rule 10, if you see someone who looks exactly like you, exactly like Dollars, or exactly like anyone alive, do not acknowledge the resemblance. Serve them normally, they're checking for awareness. Mark had added a note beneath this. They mimic poorly, look at the hands. Large. ULE 11, the lights may flicker at random. If they flicker exactly 6 times, run to the bathroom and lock yourself inside. Stay until you hear the morning birds. 6 flickers, I repeated. Yes, she said sharply, too sharply. Why 6? Because 7 means you ran too late. Rule 12, if a child enters after 4:00 a.m., they are not lost, they are not scared, and they are not alone no matter how empty the doorway looks. Offer them a candy bar, but make sure they refuse it. If they accept, hide. This one had no explanation. It didn't need one. When I finished the list, Dollars took the card back, pressing her thumb over a cracked corner as if trying to flatten it after years of trembling hands folding it, gripping it, clinging to it. She didn't look relieved that I'd read it. She looked exhausted, like she'd handed off a burden she didn't want to carry anymore. I could almost hear the ghosts of previous workers whispering through the ink of those rules. What happens if I break one? I asked. She stared at me with a hollow neutrality that felt older than fear. You won't break a rule intentionally, she said. That's not an answer. She nodded, her voice low. I know. I pressed again. Has anyone survived long working nights? Her eyes flicked to the parking lot, toward a small metal shed I hadn't noticed before. Weather-worn, padlocked, almost buried in dust. People survive, she said. For how long? She paused then, long enough to wish they left earlier. There were moments as she spoke when a strange tension etched across her face, like she wanted to tell me something deeper, something worse, but couldn't or wouldn't. Maybe the rules prevented her from explaining. Maybe the station did. The more I studied the rules, the more I realized they weren't warnings. They were patterns, behaviors, signals. Someone or something had observed this place long enough to document exactly how it behaved, and if something required rules to survive it, that meant it was intelligent enough to test boundaries. The last line at the bottom of the lamination wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Different handwriting from Mark's. Sharper, cleaner. The station listens, don't talk about the rules out loud. When I asked Dollars who wrote it, she didn't answer. She only said, please start your shift tomorrow at dusk, not earlier, not later. That night, as I lay in my apartment staring at the ceiling, the rules replayed in my mind. Not one rule explained the true danger. Every rule implied something worse behind it, like reading medical symptoms without knowing the disease. But one thought kept me awake longest. Rules exist to keep something out, or to keep something in. I still didn't know which one this station was protecting us from. Which rule would scare you the most if you had to work this night shift? Keep watching, you need to know what's waiting next. The first night I worked alone, the air felt different the moment Dolores stepped out the door. She didn't say goodbye, she didn't offer luck. She simply locked eyes with me and nodded, once like a soldier silently wishing another soldier's survival on the battlefield. Then she drove off, tail lights shrinking across the empty stretch of Highway 22 until they vanished completely. As soon as the sound of her engine faded, the silence closed in. Not peaceful silence, not the kind you get in forests or empty houses. This was thick, weighted silence, silence with presence, silence that breathed, the kind of silence that makes every instinct in your body tighten because something is listening, waiting for your first mistake. At 12:03 a.m., I was checking the expiration dates in the snack aisle when the first flicker happened, just once. A single pulse of light like the station blinked. I froze, counting in my head. 1 flicker wasn't a rule trigger. 6 flickers meant danger. 7 meant death. But the way that single blink happened, sharp, intentional, like someone tapping the light switch, made my chest tighten. The air shifted again, warmer then colder. The station always felt wrong at night, but now the wrongness felt focused, like it had noticed me. Like the building itself inhaled me as part of the environment. I reminded myself I was still in the safe hour. Nothing in the rules happened before 12:13, but my body didn't care about the timeline. Every hair on my neck stood straight. The aisles looked longer than usual, shelves stretching deeper, shadows sticking in corners that weren't there during the day. When I passed the restroom hallway, a cold breeze brushed my arm, cold enough that my skin goosebumped instantly. That hallway was dark, even with the main store lights on. As if the darkness had settled into the walls and refused to leave. I stepped behind the counter to check the time again. 12:12 a.m. 1 minute before the first rule window. I hadn't planned on being nervous about it, but the closer the clock ticked toward 12:13, the heavier. The atmosphere became, something about that minute felt wrong, like the entire store was holding its breath. The humming of the refrigerators slowed, not actually, but perceptually. The lights dimmed lower than usual. Even the dust in the air seemed to hang suspended mid-float. Then the bell over the front door chimed. 12:13 a.m. Right on time. My blood ran cold. The first rule hit me instantly. Do not acknowledge anyone who enters between 12:13 a.m. and 12:29 a.m. I kept my back turned, pretending to focus on the register, staring at the scratched countertop as my breathing grew louder in my ears. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, crossed the threshold, not shoe steps, something lighter, almost like bare feet. But the sound wasn't right, it didn't match weight or rhythm. It was like the noise was being mimicked. A sound pretending to be footsteps. The steps stopped directly in front of the counter. Every instinct screamed at me to look, to just check, to confirm what had come in. My mind played images, a lost traveler, a shadow figure, a face I recognized but shouldn't. But I tightened my jaw and forced myself to remain still. The rule mattered. Breaking it meant consequences I couldn't understand yet, but Mark's notebook made one thing clear. Once something knows you're aware, it stops pretending. The thing at the counter exhaled. Not a normal breath, too slow, too wet, thick like fog rolling through a sewer pipe. My stomach twisted. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles whitened. The breath drifted across the air, brushing against my cheek like damp static. I clenched my jaw tighter, refusing to flinch. Then it spoke. Where is your brother? My heart slammed into my ribs so violently it felt like the sound echoed in the aisles. I hadn't told anyone here about my brother. Not Dolores, not Rob, not a single soul on Highway 22. But the voice didn't sound like a stranger asking a question. It sounded like someone who already knew the answer and wanted to see how I would react. I stayed silent, I didn't breathe. The creature shifted. A scrape like fingernails dragging across the counter surface, slow, testing, curious. Something tapped twice, exactly like a person knocking on a door. Tab, as if saying, I know you can hear me. A second voice joined it, this one behind me. Then another by the restroom. Then another by the freezer. all of them asking the same question in different tones. Where is your brother? Where did he go? Why didn't he come back? My breath trembled, but I kept still. The rules didn't say don't answer. They said do not acknowledge. Silence was survival. After what felt like an hour, but was only minutes, the front door chimed again. Footsteps, sliding and unnatural, retreated into the night. Then nothing. The humming returned. The lights brightened slightly. My spine loosened. 12:29 a.m. passed. I'd survived my first rule window. But the dread didn't fade, it deepened. At 12:42 a.m., as I tried to steady my breathing by facing the shelves again, something small rolled from the snack aisle and bumped my shoe. I looked down. A glass marble. Black, polished, reflective like an eyeball. I bent slowly and picked it up. Inside the marble, something shifted, like a shadow trying to swim to the surface. I nearly dropped it. The marble vibrated once, pulsing with a heartbeat that wasn't mine, and then went still. I set it on the counter, unsure what rule it connected to. No rule mentioned objects appearing inside the store. No rule warned about items that moved on their own. But a chill seeped into my bones when I realized where it had rolled from, the bathroom hallway, the darkest part of the station. A whisper drifted from the hall, not a voice. A whisper without breath, without source, without direction. Come look. I stepped back hard. My heel hit the magazine rack. This wasn't part of any rule. This was something testing me. The marble cracked. Not shattered, just a thin fracture slicing across its surface. Something inside the marble scraped gently, like a fingernail clicking against glass. I shoved it into the drawer under the register. At 1:10 a.m., the freezer door creaked, just a little. Then again. Then a slow, rhythmic knock. My name whispered from behind the frosted glass, not yelled. Spoken like a secret between friends. Elias. My breath caught in my throat. Rule 8 blazed in my mind like a survival instinct. If you hear your name called from the freezer, turn off the lights and count backwards from 50. I reached for the switch. The knocking stopped. A whisper pressed against the glass from the inside. Don't turn the lights off, I want to see you. My hand froze. Pain stabbed my gut, not from the voice, but from realizing something horrifying. This rule had never said what would happen if the voice told me the opposite. It had never warned that sometimes the station wouldn't want me to follow the rules. Something was changing. Something was testing limits. Something was learning me. Not my job, not my face, not my habits, but my reactions. The horror wasn't rising because the station was active. It was rising because the station was paying attention. Which rule would scare you the most if you had to work this night shift? Keep watching, you need to know what's waiting next. Something changed after the freezer whispered my name. Before that moment, the station felt like a predator waiting behind glass, something that watched, stalked, observed. But after 1:10 a.m., it felt like the glass cracked. Thin hairline fractures spread through the rules themselves, as if the boundaries between follow this to survive and this won't save you anymore were starting to blur. The air thickened, the temperature dropped, shadows stretched even though the lights were steady. The aisles seemed narrower, like the station was subtly rearranging itself while I blinked. That was when I made my first mistake. Not breaking a rule, just hesitating. Hesitation is blood in the water for whatever lives here. At 1:34 a.m., I was restocking the drinks, pretending my hands weren't shaking, when something moved across the corner of my vision. A shape, faint, like someone standing in front of the chip display. I turned my head, nothing, but the chips rustled just slightly, like fingers had brushed over them a second too late. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. The station had always been haunted by motion that didn't match sound, by footsteps that didn't belong to weight, but now the wrongness felt closer, like it had stepped inside the aisles instead of lurking outside. When I passed the bathroom hallway again, the temperature dropped another few degrees, enough that I saw my breath. The lights flickered once, sharp, deliberate. One flicker, then two, not six. But each flicker lingered unnaturally long, like the bulb was struggling against something pressing against it. My heart hammered as I stopped in front of the hallway. The back of the hall was still swallowed in darkness. The fluorescent ceiling light near the bathroom door flickered 7 times, so fast and so subtle I wasn't sure whether I imagined it. Rule 11 flashed in my mind. If the lights flicker 6 times, run to the bathroom and lock yourself inside. Stay until the morning birds. But what did 7 flickers mean? Dolores never explained because... No, she did explain. 7 means you ran too late. Cold sweat slid down my spine. I wasn't in the bathroom. The door was 15 feet away. A 15-foot stretch of pure blackness. Something moved inside that dark. Not a shape, not at first. Just a subtle shift in the black, like something tall inhaled the shadows and exhaled deeper ones. I stepped back fast. That was when the first rule contradiction happened. From behind me by the counter, the bell chimed. Not possible. No one had opened the door. I had a clear line of sight. The door hadn't moved an inch. The bell chimed again. This time louder, mocking, as if something unseen tapped the bell with a fingertip just to watch me react. Rule 1 said never acknowledge anyone who enters during the forbidden window. But this wasn't entry. This was imitation. This was the station mimicking a rule. My breath grew shallow. I backed away toward the counter, every instinct screaming to run, while my rational mind reminded me that nothing in the station ever rewarded running. The bell chimed again, but this time, the chime came from behind the restroom hallway. That impossible black stretch. A chill tore through my chest. It was copying the bell. It was copying the store sounds. It was copying everything it saw me respond to. The marble in the drawer rattled violently, striking the wood with small cracking thuds like something inside it wanted out. The drawer shook, the counter trembled, the entire station made a sound like metal breathing. Then, from the bathroom hallway, footsteps, not many, just one pair, slow, dragging, heavier than anything that had entered earlier. I froze, my hand hovered over the nearest weapon, a rusted metal flashlight on the counter. It wouldn't help, but gripping something made the fear feel physical instead of cosmic. The footsteps grew closer. Not steady, jerking. Something was trying to remember how to walk. The light at the end of the hallway flickered again, 6 times this time, clean, distinct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My chest locked tight. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a near miss. This was exactly the danger the rule warned about. I turned toward the hallway, preparing to sprint the 15 feet to the bathroom door and lock myself inside, praying that whatever flickered the lights hadn't already crossed the unseen boundary. But the station had other plans. From the freezer behind me, a voice whispered, "Don't run." Not my voice. Not a mimic of someone I knew. A child's whisper. But Rule 12 said, if a child enters aft, 4:00 a.m., give them a candy bar. Make sure they refuse it. If they accept, hide. This wasn't 4:00 a.m. This wasn't an entry. This wasn't a candy bar scenario. This was a rule breaking itself. The lights in the main store dimmed. I could see the restroom hallway only as a strip of blackness, punctured by a single faint bulb stuttering above the bathroom door. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. What? And then, they stopped. Something stood just past the edge of visible light. I could feel it watching me. Not with eyes, with intent, with awareness. The store hummed. The freezer trembled. The marble cracked again. And then, a voice came from the hallway. My voice. Perfect, steady, confident. Elias, come here. No rule covered this. No rule warned me about hearing myself. The station wasn't just mimicking sounds now. It was mimicking identity. My identity. My throat tightened. I stepped backward slowly toward the counter. My voice spoke again, closer this time. Elias, you can trust me. That was wrong. I never sounded like that. Too calm, too sure, too practiced. I gripped the flashlight tighter, knuckles white. Then another voice layered beneath it, the same voice from earlier, the one that asked about my brother. Where did he go, Elias? My stomach dropped. It had learned my name. It had learned my voice. It had learned the sound of my footsteps. It had learned the bell. The rules weren't enough anymore because something was learning me. As I stared into the darkness, the air in the station thickened, vibrating faintly. For the first time since stepping foot in this cursed place, I felt something worse than fear. Recognition. Recognition from something that wasn't supposed to know me. Recognition from something that wanted me, not as prey, but as a replacement. The silence after it spoke my name, my own voice speaking my name, felt heavier than the entire station. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just waited inside the shadow-thick hallway like a mistake the world wasn't meant to hold. I backed up until my hip bumped the counter. The old flashlight trembled in my hand. Every instinct I had was screaming. Do not let it step into the light. Do not let it fully copy you. But something was wrong. Something new was wrong. Because when I exhaled, I didn't hear my breath. I heard two. One from me. One from inside the dark. Perfectly synchronized. Then a soft dragging sound, fabric. My jacket sleeve. No, it's jacket sleeve. It was wearing my shape in the dark. My lungs tightened so hard it felt like someone had twisted a fist into my rib cage. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. I wanted to bury my face in the dirt outside and cry until morning. But I remembered Rule 9. Never run, never let it chase you. Running turned this place into a hunting ground. I stayed still. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a whisper drifted out of the darkness. Do you remember what he looked like? The breath left my lungs in a sharp, cold burst. No. It wasn't talking about me. It wasn't mimicking a memory I'd spoken aloud. It was digging. Deep. So deep. My brother. The words slipped out before I could stop them. A mistake. A fatal one. Because the moment I said it, the temperature dropped 5 degrees and the store lights dimmed in a soft, predatory pulse. And from the darkness, my voice replied. I do. My knees buckled. It wasn't just mimicking me now, it was mimicking my past. The footsteps inside the hall finally moved. Slow, measured, deliberate. The sound of me walking. The sound of myself approaching. I held my breath so the second breathing wouldn't match my rhythm, but it didn't matter. It already owned the timing. It had learned it hours ago, or maybe years ago, or maybe long before this station even existed. The light nearest the hallway flickered 6 times. Not a glitch, a warning. My cue to run to the bathroom and lock myself inside. Except the path to the bathroom was exactly where it waited. A perfect trap. The light flickered a 7th time. The forbidden flicker. The one Dolars warned me about. 7 means you ran too late. The shadow at the end of the hallway stepped into the light. But it wasn't me. Not exactly. It was taller by an inch, maybe two. Its shoulders were wrong, too even, too squared. Its head tilted left, same as mine, but the movement was smoother. Almost graceful. And its face, God, its face was a blueprint of mine. Not finished, not fully grown, still forming under the skin like wet clay being sculpted around a skull. No eyebrows, no full definition around the mouth. But the cheekbones were mine. The jaw shape was mine. The hairline was mine. And the eyes, empty, flat, colorless, just placeholders until it learned more. I staggered back, legs weak, throat tight. My flashlight trembled so hard the beam jittered across the tiles. The thing took another step forward. A perfect imitation of me trying to walk. Then my voice, cold, monotone, emotionless, slid through the air. You left him alone. The blood drained from my face. My chest locked. My vision blurred. No one here knew what happened to my brother. I never told dolers. Never told a single coworker. Barely told myself. Yet this thing, this unfinished counterfeit version of me, had found it. Don't, I whispered. Its jaw cracked audibly as its mouth tried to smile. I remember what he looked like. My throat closed. A sound came out of me, half breath, half broken sob. I'm not listening, I said, gripping the counter so tightly I felt the wood dig into my palms. The lights dimmed. The aisles groaned. The marble in the drawer rattled like something inside wanted out. It kept walking, slow, calculated steps that echoed wrong in the narrow hall. Mimicking me, perfecting me, replacing me. If it finished forming my face, if it got the voice right, if it matched my breath, one day I would leave the station, and something else would walk out wearing me. I snapped. No, I shouted, voice cracking. Stop copying me. The thing froze, totally still. The store fell silent, like everything inside was holding a breath. 6 seconds. 7. Wait. Then, my voice answered. Okay. But the word wasn't spoken. It was delivered in a perfect, sharpened echo that came from everywhere. Aisles, freezer, vents, ceiling. Like the station itself said it. And that was when the rule board above the counter changed. Letters rearranged themselves in real time. Scratching, shifting, carving new warnings into the plastic. Every rule rewrote itself. Rule 1, don't acknowledge the mimic. Rule 2, don't react when it learns your name. Rule 3, don't let it finish your face. Rule 4, if it speaks about your past, leave the aisle immediately. Rule 5, if it ever says, okay, you have already broken a rule. My mouth went dry. I had already broken all of them. The mimic took another step. Closer, another, closer. My heartbeat drowned out the humming. It opened its mouth, my mouth, and whispered, come finish the shift. Then it took one more step, and the lights exploded into total darkness. Not flickered, not dimmed. They went out. Every bulb, every display, every machine. And in that pitch black void, I heard the sound I feared more than anything. My own footsteps, running toward me. The silence after hearing my own voice call my name was heavier than the entire station itself, thick enough that even my breath felt trapped in my throat as I backed into the counter with the old metal flashlight shaking in my hand. Something inside the hallway wasn't just waiting, it was studying, learning, shaping itself into something impossibly close to me. When I exhaled, I didn't just hear my breath, I heard a second one, perfectly synchronized, breathing from inside the darkness like an echo wearing lungs it hadn't earned. Then came the soft scrape of fabric, the unmistakable drag of a jacket sleeve against a wall, my jacket sleeve, except I hadn't moved. Whatever stood in the dark was wearing my outline. My heartbeat slammed so violently against my ribs I felt lightheaded, because this wasn't just mimicry anymore, this was rehearsal. I forced myself not to run, Rule 9 made that clear, but staying still felt like volunteering for death. When the whisper floated out, "Do you remember what he looked like?" my knees nearly gave out, because that wasn't a phrase the station should have known, wasn't a story I'd shared, wasn't a memory I'd spoken aloud. Before my brain could stop my mouth, I whispered, "My brother," and everything inside the store reacted like I had fed blood into the air. The lights dimmed in a long, deliberate pulse, the freezers groaned, the marble cracked against the drawer, and from the dark, using my voice with perfect cold flatness, it answered, "I do." That was when the first shape stepped forward, a taller, wronger version of me, its shoulders too straight, its posture too precise, its head tilted to the same side mine did when I was anxious, but smoother, cleaner, as if the gesture had been traced rather than lived. When the light finally reached its face, I nearly recoiled. It was my face in blueprint form, features outlined but not fully sculpted, eyebrows missing, the mouth too soft and shapeless, and the eyes, those flat, glass-like placeholders, empty as if staring from behind a mask still being molded. Every step it took echoed wrong, too hollow, too smooth, like it was adjusting the timing of my footsteps in real time. And then it spoke again, my exact voice, but drained of emotion, weaponized into monotone precision. "You left him alone." I felt the world tilt, my throat locked, and a surge of panic shot through my limbs so violently I knocked something off the counter without realizing. I pleaded don't, but pleading didn't matter because the mimic smiled, a slow, cracking stretch of the jaw that split wider than any human smile should go, and whispered, "I remember what he looked like." That broke something ins. Eyed me, I clung to the counter to stay upright. The aisles groaned like living ribs being compressed, the freezer doors trembled, the entire station felt like lungs breathing around me. When I snapped and shouted for it to stop copying me, everything in the store froze, perfectly still, as though the place itself took offense. The mimic didn't blink, didn't twitch, didn't breathe. It only stared with those half-formed eyes. 8 seconds of silence passed before my voice, sharpened and stretched unnaturally, drifted from everywhere at once, "Okay." Not from the mimic's mouth, not from the hallway. From the ceiling, the vents, the tiles, the freezers, the shelves, like the station itself spoke the word using my vocal cords. Then I watched something impossible happen. The rule board above the counter began rewriting itself. Letters dragged and carved over the surface as if the plastic were soft clay reshaping under invisible hands. New warnings etched themselves into existence. Don't acknowledge the mimic. Don't react when it learns your name. Don't let it finish your face. Don't let it speak your past. If it ever says okay, you have already broken a rule. My skin went cold enough to ache because I had already broken every single one. The mimic took one more step into the light, and it was closer than I realized, completely still, completely wrong, close enough that if it reached forward, it could touch my chest. My heartbeat drowned out everything, until the lights overhead didn't flicker, didn't dim, didn't buzz, they exploded into absolute darkness. No hum, no glow, no reflection, just blackness so total it swallowed my outline. And in that suffocating void, I heard the sound I feared more than any voice, more than any whisper, more than any rule, my own footsteps running toward me. The darkness swallowed everything so completely that for a full second I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. And in that pitch-black suffocation, the sound of my own footsteps rushing toward me nearly tore my sanity clean in half. The rhythm was unmistakable, my gait, my weight, my heel-to-toe pattern, but distorted, faster, like something wearing my shape was sprinting without remembering how human bodies balance themselves. I spun blindly, flashlight useless, my hands gripping the counter edge as those footsteps grew louder and sharper, as if they were slamming directly into the tiles right behind my spine. I forced myself not to run, even as my legs twitched to bolt, because Rule 9 burned inside my skull like a siren. Never run, never let it chase you. But how do you obey a rule when the thing copying you ignores it entirely? The footsteps stopped so close I swear I felt breath, or the imitation of breath, brush the back of my neck. My body froze. The air behind me felt thick, cold, wrong, like a silhouette pressed just inches away, waiting for my slightest movement to decide what shape to carve into itself next. For a moment nothing happened, no sound, no motion, just me and the thing masquerading as me standing back to back in perfect darkness. Then I heard a tiny, sharp crack beneath my boot, the marble. It had rolled out of the drawer on its own and positioned itself at my foot like a warning or a witness, and the soft sound of it cracking again echoed in a way that didn't match its size. Something near my ear moved, not breath, not whisper, skin, stretching, folding, shifting like a face adjusting itself. When the lights blasted back on with a stuttering electrical scream, I flinched hard, blinking through the harsh glare, and the mimic was no longer behind me. It stood 6 feet away at the end of aisle 3, facing me with a posture that made nausea twist through my stomach. Its face had changed again, more complete, the eyebrows faint now like smudged shadows, the mouth shaping itself into something more familiar, the jawline sculpted clean, the eyes still wrong, too pale, too empty, but closer than before, as if it had studied mine and was approximating emotion. My flashlight flickered back to life without me touching it. The beam fell directly on the mimic's face, and the skin rippled subtly under the light, almost melting upward like it was absorbing the details it hadn't finished copying. It tilted its head, my habit, but this time the angle was perfect, as if the motion had been rehearsed. Then it opened its mouth. My voice came out again, but now fully formed, trembling with an emotion I recognized too well. You left him alone. That sentence stabbed somewhere deep, sharp enough that I lowered the flashlight for half a second. A mistake the station punished immediately, because the mimic took 3 steps toward me in a single, fluid glide, covering half the aisle without bending a joint. I stumbled backward, catching myself against the counter, breath shaking. "Stop," I whispered. "Stop copying me. Stop saying that." The mimic smiled, and this time the smile was closer to mine, crooked, weak on the left side, too wid. But not impossibly so, as if it was refining itself in real time. Then in the same fragile voice I once used at 16 during the moment everything changed in my life, it whispered, "He called your name." My lungs locked so hard I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. I hadn't heard that detail aloud since the night it happened. Not to therapists, not to dolers, not to myself. A faint, hollow ringing filled the store as the AC unit stuttered on and off like it was fighting the air itself. The rule board flickered violently, words rearranging faster than before. Now it displayed only one massive warning across its surface: don't let it say his name. But before I could move, before I could think, before I could even prepare myself, the mimic leaned forward, jaw clicking, and in a soft, agonizingly accurate imitation of my teenage voice, it began forming the first syllable of my brother's name. Something primal surged through me, fear so sharp it became rage, or rage so desperate it became survival. I hurled the flashlight at its head. The moment the flashlight left my fingers, I knew I shouldn't have thrown it. Rule 9 warned that sudden aggression triggered pursuit, but the beam hit the mimic's cheek and the skin rippled violently like disturbed water. The mimic didn't flinch, it didn't blink, it didn't react like something struck. Instead, it reacted like something updating. It slowly turned its head, eyes taking on a new shape: curiosity. Hunger, my curiosity, my fear. It was learning my emotional responses next. Then it whispered through a mouth that was nearly mine, "Don't run." And the lights went out again, not darkness this time, obliteration. A void so deep I felt my hands disappear in front of me. And in that void, those footsteps, my footsteps, began running again, circling the aisles, multiplying, not one mimic, not one version, but several overlapping copies of my gait, pounding the tiles in a widening spiral around me. My legs trembled, my throat burned. I pressed myself against the freezer door, frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, as the sound of me sprinting faster and faster closed in. Then one of the footsteps stopped inches from my left ear, and in a perfect whisper of my grown voice, it said one word. A word that made every hair on my body stand upright. A word that no rule had ever warned me about. A word my brother said the last time I ever heard him alive. "Please." The word "please" didn't echo, it burrowed. It sank straight into the softest part of my mind, the part I'd spent years barricading behind silence and routine and pretending not to think about it. Hearing it now in my exact voice, in my brother's last tone before the world cracked open, it tore through me so violently that for a breathless moment I forgot where I was, forgot the station, forgot the rules, forgot everything except the memory I had spent half my life trying to bury. The darkness around me throbbed like a living wound. The footsteps, my footsteps, stopped all at once, as if every mimic had frozen mid-motion, waiting to see what that word would do to me. I pressed my back harder into the freezer door behind me, but the cold metal wasn't reassuring. It felt like something breathing through steel. The air tightened, my lungs strained, my hands went numb. Somewhere deep in the station, a metallic groan rolled through the aisles like the building itself was twisting its spine. I forced myself to whisper, "You're not him." The darkness didn't move, but it changed, somehow brighter and deeper at the same time, like the station inhaled sharply through unseen lungs. Then a second voice emerged from the void, not mine this time, not my brother's either, something older, something patient, something that had watched countless night shift workers long before dolers, long before me. A voice made of static and cold air sliding across tile. "You broke a rule." My blood iced over. I couldn't tell where the voice came from, left aisle, right aisle, behind me, inside me. It didn't matter, the station was speaking now, fully awake, fully aware, fully hungry. I swallowed hard. Which one? My voice cracked, more breath than sound. A soft scraping noise circled me like an animal dragging its claws across plastic. Rule board must have flickered, recarving itself in the dark, because the air vibrated with electricity, the faint buzz of rearranging letters carving through the silence. All of them. My stomach dropped. I felt the tile beneath my boots shift slightly, as if lowering like a slow elevator descent, but the ground hadn't actually moved. My perception had. The store's geometry warped, aisles bending around me in subtle angles, freezer doors stretching taller, shelves narrowing. The station was folding itself inward, reconfiguring around its new rule violator. And then somewhere in the black, something exhaled, a long, slow, deliberate breath right beside my cheek. I jerked away, but the darkness followed, clinging. Like a second skin, the voice, my brother's voice, now whispered, "You left me." My heart detonated, not metaphorically. It felt like an actual explosion under my ribs. The pain shot into my arms, heavy and electric, and I tasted metal in my mouth. "Stop," I choked. "Please stop." But the station didn't stop. It deepened, it darkened, it leaned closer. A soft padding of footsteps, light, childlike, began approaching from aisle 1. Another pair, heavy, stumbling, approached from aisle 4. A third, dragging, uneven, came from directly behind me. All of them mine. All of them versions of me I had never been but could have been if I hadn't made it out of that night alive. The freezer handle behind me twitched, click, 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 like something inside desperately wanted out, or in. The marble at my foot rolled in a small, tight circle, as though some invisible hand spun it like a coin. Over and over, faster, faster. And then it cracked straight down the middle with a small, brittle snap that echoed far louder than it should have. A low hum rolled through the station, deep, vibrating, the sound of power lines shorting out and reforming. The rule board, somewhere in the dark, strobed once with a burst of light that carved a single phrase across the air. No more rules. I felt my legs weaken. The rules were the only structure keeping this place contained. Without them, everything was open, everything was permitted, everything was hungry. The mimic stepped forward, not the one making footsteps, but the original one, the almost finished version of me. A faint outline appeared in the dark, illuminated by nothing, as though the station wanted me to see it. Its face had changed again, more complete, more accurate, more alive, except the eyes, God, the eyes, still glossy, still hollow, still wrong. It raised its hand slowly, and my arm twitched at the same time, mirroring it like my body was being puppeted. Then it spoke, not imitating me this time, not copying anything, just speaking with its own voice for the first time. There was never supposed to be two of us. The freezing nausea that rolled through me almost sent me to my knees. My throat tightened, my vision sparkled at the edges. The mimic stepped closer, its bare feet silent on tile, its face now inches from mine in the dark. The smell of cold earth and old breath licked off it. I whispered, "What do you want?" It tilted its head, my tilt perfected, and whispered back, "To finish." The freezer behind me burst open with a metallic crash, releasing a blast of sub-zero air so violent it shoved my entire body forward. The lights didn't come on, but something else did. A faint, ghostly illumination that hovered like fog near the ceiling, letting me see the mimic more clearly. That was the moment I realized its mouth had fully formed. And it was smiling, a smile I recognized, the smile I forced the night everything went wrong. The footsteps around me circled faster. My own voice whispered, "Please," again from somewhere to my right. The childlike footsteps pattered closer from my left. Something brushed my ankle, cold fingers, my own fingers from some version of me that hadn't made it out. The mimic reached up and touched my face with a fingertip colder than metal. And in a voice that sounded like inevitability carved into flesh, it whispered, "Let me finish your face." The store exhaled. The tile beneath me vibrated. The aisles leaned inward, and I felt something deep and ancient press into my mind as the darkness tightened its grip, because the station wasn't just trying to kill me. It was trying to replace me with something that already knew my memories, my voice, my guilt, my footsteps. Something that wanted to step out into daylight wearing my skin. The last thought I had before everything plunged into a deeper black was this: the rules weren't to protect me from the station. The rules were to protect the world from whatever lived in here with me. The darkness that swallowed me this time didn't just blind me, it lowered me, as if the entire station were sinking and dragging me with it into a deeper layer beneath reality, a place the rules had only hinted at but never fully revealed. I felt the floor tilt, not physically but perceptually, as if gravity itself were reconsidering where it wanted to pull me. My ears rang with a low, vibrating hum, so deep it felt like it came from inside my teeth. The mimic's cold fingertips still rested against my cheek, and the moment I realized I could no longer feel my skin beneath it, panic surged through me like boiling water. I jerked back, and the mimic drifted forward in the darkness without taking a step, not walking, but continuing like it, and the shadows were the same material stretching toward me. The ghostly light near the ceiling brightened just enough that I could see vague outlines. Shelves bending at impossible angles, the counter warped like soft clay, the aisles pulsing faintly like the ribs of something brie. Athing around me, my breath echoed strangely, each inhale delayed by a fraction of a second, each exhale returned to me hollow, as if the station was practicing how I breathed. "Stop," I whispered, but even the whisper didn't behave right. It left my mouth late, lagging like a glitching audio file. The mimic's half-formed eyes reflected nothing, absorbing the faint light instead of catching it. "You know why he said please, don't you?" It whispered, and the voice was now neither mine nor the station's, but something in between, something that sounded like a reflection speaking back. My stomach twisted hard. "Don't," I said again. My voice trembled. The station hummed louder. A cold draft whipped down aisle 2 and blew past me, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and old stone, like the smell of a place buried under the highway long before the gas station existed. The marble pieces on the floor shook violently, then skittered across the tile like insects fleeing a predator. Somewhere near aisle 4, I heard a dragging noise, not footsteps this time, but something heavier, like a body being pulled across tile by invisible hands. The mimic lifted its head and smiled wider, too wide, like the skin of its cheeks was stretching beyond the shape of its skull. "He called your name," it repeated softly. The air inside my chest folded inward. I wanted to cover my ears, but my arms wouldn't obey. They felt sluggish, like the station was learning the limits of my movements and experimenting with how much control it could siphon away. I forced my hand to my face, forcing my fingers to curl, but it was like pushing through syrup. The mimic watched with fascination, head tilted, tracking every micro-movement with hungry precision. "Stop copying me," I said, or tried to say. The words came out half-swallowed, as though the station chewed them before they reached the air. The mimic leaned closer, and now its face was almost mine, recognizable enough that if someone walked in right now, they wouldn't immediately see the wrongness, only the pale blankness of the eyes and the too-perfect smoothness of the skin. The ceiling fog thickened, swirling in slow circles, as if stirred by an unseen giant hand. I felt the temperature drop sharply, my breath puffed white into the air. The freezer door behind me creaked open by itself, releasing a dense wave of cold that wrapped around my legs, but it wasn't the kind of cold that numbed skin, it was the kind that noticed skin, the kind that clung like a predator sniffing for blood. The mimic's jaw clicked, then opened wider, and in that perfect, calm, surgically precise voice it whispered, "He didn't drown until after you left." My knees buckled. My vision blurred, my breath hitched so violently it felt like choking. "Stop," I gasped, "stop." The mimic's face softened into a replica of grief, my grief, a shape my face had worn only once in my life, the night I stood on the riverbank screaming for help that didn't come in time. My reflection was mourning me. The tile beneath my feet rippled faintly, like something unseen pushed upward from beneath the floor. I staggered back and slammed into the freezer door, which shuddered like something behind it pushed out in response. A sound came from inside the freezer, wet, gurgling, bubbling like frozen lungs thawing and inhaling for the first time in years. My heart lurched, my breath fractured. I pressed both hands to the freezer door instinctively and immediately regretted it because something pressed back. A hand, a small, cold hand, the exact size of my brother's. My chest caved in and panic detonated in a violent burst that shredded all logic. I ripped my hands away with a choked cry. The mimic stepped closer. "He called you," it murmured. "You heard him and you ran." I didn't. My voice cracked into something broken. "I didn't run." Silence. Then the mimic said with devastating certainty, "You did." The freezer rattled violently. The aisles shuddered. Lights stuttered faintly, attempting to come back on, failing, and each flicker revealed a worse distortion of the station's shape, like the whole place was turning inside out, showing its bones. Shadows stretched across the floor as though reaching for me, thin and finger-like, scraping the tile as they moved. The rule board flickered once, and for a split second the lights blasted fully on, revealing the mimic inches from my face, smiling with a mouth shaped exactly like mine. And then the lights died again. Total darkness. No sound, no breath, no footsteps, just cold. And a voice, my brother's real voice this time, soft, scared, wet from river water. A voice I hadn't heard outside nightmares in years, whispered right beside my ear. "Ilias, why did you leave me?" The ground fell out from under me, not metaphorically, not emotionally. The station literally shifted downward, pulling me into whatever lay below, its true level, its open mouth, its unfinished work. And as I fell into that swallow, in dark, I realized the rules weren't collapsing. They were evolving around me. And the new ones weren't meant to keep me alive. They were meant to finish replacing me. I didn't remember crossing the parking lot back to the store, just the way the gravel seemed to stretch, every step repeating like I was walking across the same 6 feet of ground on a loop, until suddenly my hand was on the door handle, and the bell over the entrance gave that flat, wrong clang. The air inside felt thicker, heavier, like the AC had been replaced with something denser than oxygen, something that clung to the back of my throat when I breathed. The fluorescent lights were buzzing at a new pitch, higher and needle-sharp, and for a second I thought they were about to burn out again, that the void protocol was going to trigger a second round just to see if I could survive it twice. The rules card in my pocket felt hot against my chest, like it had absorbed all the cold from my skin and was keeping it for later. I pulled it out without thinking and immediately wished I hadn't, because it wasn't the same card. Same laminated edges, same size, same cheap print job, but the list was different. Rule 3, the one about the pumps, had been pushed down the list, and in its place, right under "Do not look into any reflection after midnight," a new line had appeared in clean black text that hadn't been there an hour ago. If you survive a full shift, do not return. If you must return, do not trust your own memory of this place. I read it twice, my brain trying to make room for a new rule in a list I'd already committed to heart, and underneath the new text, smaller, almost hidden in the margin, was another sentence. This rule was added for you, Ilias. My name in print, not handwritten, not scribbled in later. The same font, the same alignment as the rest, like it had always been there. My tongue went dry. Somewhere near the back of the store, one of the coolers coughed to life with a wet, rattling wheeze, and every bottle inside clinked against its neighbor like 100 tiny teeth knocking together. I told myself I was going to the counter to grab Caleb's notebook again, to see if his entries mentioned the rules changing, but my feet carried me past the register without stopping, down the narrow aisle lined with chips and stale bread, toward the employee door that led to the tiny office and the sagging metal locker where he kept his things. The door was open. It hadn't been open last time. I could see the edge of the desk, the corner of the ancient computer monitor Sila's supposedly used for inventory. Light bled out from the office, not the jaundiced yellow of the store lights, but a softer, warmer glow, the kind you'd get from a lamp in a living room. It smelled wrong too, not coffee, not old paper. The scent was familiar in a way that made my chest hurt. Laundry detergent, the cheap blue kind Teresa used to buy when we were still splitting rent and pretending things could be fixed if we tried hard enough. Don't follow voices you recognize. The gas station rules had their own version of the tunnel etiquette, and I hadn't seen that on the card before either, but there it was now, number 7, sitting between "Do not leave the station before sunrise" and "Do not step past the pumps after 3:00 a.m." like it had always been part of the list. Voices, smells, memories. The office light flickered, not on, not off, more like it blinked, like an eye adjusting. Someone shifted in the chair inside. The springs creaked with that specific tired groan of old furniture that's been sat in too many times by the same body. My body knew that sound. I stopped in the doorway, couldn't make my hand reach for the frame, couldn't make my foot cross the threshold. "You're making this harder than it has to be," a voice said from inside. My voice, not exactly a recording, something slightly too smooth at the edges, like the words had been sanded down and polished until they gleamed. "All you have to do is sit down and finish the shift. You've already broken more rules than Caleb ever did. Might as well lean in." I could see the silhouette of a shoulder now, the back of a head, the outline of a familiar jacket collar, the same jacket I was wearing. My hand went instinctively to my arm, to where the void's cold had burned into my skin earlier. I could still feel the echo of it under the fabric, like frost beneath a scar. "You're not me," I said, and it sounded weak even to my own ears. The figure in the chair laughed quietly, not mockingly, patiently. "You keep saying that like you remember what you were like before you drove out here," it said, still facing away from me. "You took this job because you were already half gone, because you wanted rules that told you what to do instead of choices. I'm just helping." The rules card fluttered in my hand, and when I looked down, more text had appeared at the bottom in that same flat, precise font, squeezed in. "Oh, the white space under the last rule. If you hear your own voice from another room, do not enter. The thing inside wants to show you what you look like to it." The option existed for a moment. I could turn around, walk back to the counter, sit on the stool, and white-knuckle my way through the last few hours staring at the door until the sun rose and Silas's truck pulled back into the lot. Or I could step into that office and see what the rules were trying to keep me from seeing, find out whether the thing mimicking me was a copy waiting for its chance or the original pointing out that I was the imitation. Curiosity, right arrow; unease, right arrow; confusion, right arrow; fear, right arrow; panic, right arrow; horror. I could feel the emotional flow tightening around my ribs like a belt. "Why did you add the new rule?" I asked, because if the card could change on its own, something had to be deciding the wording. The figure in the chair shifted. I saw a sliver of a profile now, just enough to register as my nose, my jaw, the shadowed line of my mouth. You did, it said. You'll get there, eventually, after you've come back a few times and realized you don't recognize the man in the mirror anymore. It sighed, and that sound hurt more than the void burn. It sounded tired the way I was tired. You think this is your first shift here? It asked quietly. You really think you just pulled off the highway tonight because you were out of money? The bell at the front door chimed once, flat and wrong, and the entire store seemed to hold its breath. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps on gravel outside, slow and measured, circling the building in that same perfect radius I'd heard back on Highway 666 when I swore I'd never take another night shift job. Different state, different road, same cadence. The sound overlapped with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell which was which. The figure in the chair hummed under its breath, tuneless like it was stalling, buying time, for me or for it, I couldn't tell. Look, it said, and there was a kind of weary mercy in its tone now. When the shift ends, one of us walks out, one of us stays. That's always how it works. The rules don't protect you, they sort you. They decide which version of you gets to go back to pretending there's a world outside this parking lot. I'm just here to keep the place open while you make up your mind which one you want to be. My throat closed around the words I wanted to say. That I didn't want the job, that I didn't want the money badly enough, that I didn't want to be part of a system that had a protocol for which Elias gets to be real, printed in neat bullet points. Somewhere behind me near the coolers, glass rattled in its shelves like teeth chattering from cold, and a low electric hum rolled through the floor, vibrating up through my boots. The pumps had turned themselves on again. I didn't need the monitor to know Pump 4 was dispensing into empty air. The rules card in my hand grew heavier, the laminate edges biting into my fingers. Tiny hairline crack ran across the plastic, and through that crack, just for a second, I thought I saw another list of rules layered underneath the first. Same headings, different details, different name at the top, not Elias, not Caleb, someone else who'd stood in this doorway and tried to decide whether stepping forward was worse than stepping back. You don't have to choose right now, the not quite me in the chair said softly. That's the joke, you already did. You chose when you didn't leave the first time. When you read the rules and stayed anyway, the rest is just watching yourself catch up. The office light blinked again, slower this time, like it was getting tired too. I realized with a cold clarity that settled into my bones that I couldn't tell whether I was standing in the doorway looking in or sitting in the chair remembering what it felt like to stand where I was now. For a heartbeat, both positions felt true, layered over each other like misprinted frames of film. In the parking lot, something heavy brushed against the front window with the sound of skin on glass, dragging, testing. The bell stayed mercifully silent. The new rule on the card, the one about not returning, seemed to pulsing dark on the page. I closed my eyes not to look away but to try and remember which version of tonight I believed in more. The one where this was my first shift, or the one where I'd already failed to leave and I was watching myself try again from the other side. The moment I opened my eyes, the office doorway wasn't where I remembered it being. It had shifted a few inches to the left, like the whole building had inhaled and settled differently while I blinked, or worse, like my memory had slipped sideways, leaving me aligned with a version of the room that didn't match the one I'd been standing in seconds earlier. The not me in the chair didn't seem bothered by the displacement. He simply tapped a slow rhythm on the armrest with fingers that looked exactly like mine except for the slight delay in how the tendons moved beneath the skin, like the gestures were being puppeted a split second behind the intent. You're close, he murmured without turning around. You're almost remembering the order of things. His voice wasn't mocking, it was pitying, and somehow that hurt more. A faint quiver ran through the fluorescent light overhead, not a flicker, but a tremor, as though the light was shivering in anticipation of something inevitable. The rules card in my hand pulsed once, as if timed to the flicker, and when I glanced down at it, the laminate surface was damp, condensation beating along the edges like it had just been pulled out of cold water. My finger left a streak across the plastic when I adjusted my grip, and beneath that streak one of the older rules, do not leave the station before sunrise, blurred, then sharpened again with slightly different wording, do not leave until one of you is chosen. I froze so hard the breath locked in my chest like stone. I didn't write that, I whispered, barely audible, but the man in the chair turned his head just enough that I could see half of his face in profile, the half that wore my features with unnerving sincerity, as though he wasn't copying me anymore, just sharing the same bone structure. You will, he said softly. Every shift ends the same way. The rules get clearer each time. The question is just whether you will. He tapped the armrest again. Or whether I will, my throat constricted into a tight, burning line. This is not my second shift, I said, desperate to hear myself insist on something real, something linear, something sane. I've only been here one night. That's what everyone says, he replied, lifting one shoulder in a near-perfect imitation of the defensive shrug I'd learned as a teenager. But the station remembers better than you do. Air outside the office changed again. Shelves creaked, shifting subtly like vertebrae adjusting themselves under muscle. Something heavy slid across tile, dragging slowly, patiently, as if approaching from the far side of aisle 5. I felt more than heard it, felt the pressure change, the temperature dip, the way every hair on my arms and neck rose as though the air itself had become electric. "It's looking for you," the not me said, not unkindly. Or looking for me, hard to tell at this point. My chest tightened. "What is?" He smiled faintly, eyes closing like he was listening to a lullaby. "Your replacement." I shook my head violently, as if physical denial could scrub away the meaning in those words. "The mimic?" I asked, but he opened his eyes and shook his head once, slow, sad. "No, the mimic is just the first draft." His voice lowered. "The station itself decides the final one." My breath stuttered, and the rules card bent slightly in my hand as my grip tightened. "Why me?" He laughed softly, a painful sound, like a man remembering a joke that had stopped being funny decades ago. "It's never you," he said. "Not until it is. Not until you're the one who makes the mistake, reads the wrong line, asks the wrong question, looks at the wrong reflection." My gut dropped. The bathroom mirror, the gas pump glass, the metal freezer door. I hadn't looked, had I? I couldn't remember. God, I couldn't remember. A slow scraping sound approached again, louder this time, rhythmic, like fingernails dragging across the tile in long, deliberate arcs. "If I step inside that room," I whispered, "what happens?" The man in the chair finally turned fully toward me, and the motion was too fluid now, too natural, like he wasn't imitating me anymore, but reclaiming a movement he had once owned. His face was mine, entirely mine, except for the eyes, still wrong, still empty, still waiting to decide what color they would be. "You step inside," he said. "One of us gets to stop remembering." His gaze dropped to the rules card, and the other gets to keep going. I felt dizzy, like the floor had tilted again. "What if I walk away?" I asked, voice cracking. He smiled, not cruelly, almost lovingly, and whispered, "Then I walk out instead." A cold spike lanced through my spine. The scraping sound stopped abruptly, right at the threshold behind me, not in the office, in the store, inches away. I didn't turn, I didn't breathe. The man in the chair leaned slightly forward, eyes locked onto the darkness behind me, and for the first time I saw fear flash across his face, my fear. "It's here," he whispered. "Choose." The lights flickered violently once, twice, then steadied. A shadow stretched across the floor behind me, tall, familiar, but with angles that didn't belong to bones. My pulse thrashed in my throat. "How do I know which one I am?" I begged. His expression softened in heartbreaking pity. "That's the point," he said gently. "You don't." The scraping stopped. The shadow froze. The air thickened like a throat swallowing. And in that razor-thin moment between breath and movement, between identity and erasure, the rule card in my hand twitched, ticked like a heartbeat forming in plastic. And a new line of text began carving itself across the bottom in real time. I looked down, so did he. The words carved themselves letter by letter. "If you cannot tell which one you are, the station already chose." The office light blinked off. The store plunged into half darkness. And something behind me inhaled, familiar, identical, my breath, but not mine. The inhale behind me wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that pressed into the back of my skull like a cold palm. A perfect replica of the way I breathe when I'm trying not to panic, short, shallow, held too long, then released in a trembling exhale. And hearing that exact rhythm coming from something standing inches behind me made my legs go hollow, my spine curl inward, my thoughts fracture into pieces that didn't line up anymore. Still, I didn't turn around, not because of bravery, but because my body had entered a kind of terror paralysis where moving was impossible and thinking was optional. And the only thing anchoring me was the rule card in my hand, vibrating with a faint internal pulse, like it had grown something alive inside it. The not me in the chair didn't move, didn't breathe, but his eyes, my eyes, shuddered, flickering with an emotion I couldn't read. Fear, maybe. Pity, definitely. Resignation, absolutely. "It's waiting," he whispered, and even though his voice stayed soft, it cut through my skull like cold wire. "It needs you to recognize something. Once you recognize it, once you acknowledge it, the choice completes itself." My throat constricted. "Recognize what?" I whispered back, but even as I said it, I felt the answer coil inside me like a parasite waking up. The lights hum-shuddered above us, not flickering this time but dimming, as if the room's power wasn't failing, but submitting, lowering itself the way prey lowers its head. The presence behind me shifted its weight, not stepping, but adjusting, as if aligning itself perfectly with my spine, matching me vertebra by vertebra, breath by breath, identity by identity. I felt its mouth near the side of my neck, but its breath wasn't warm or cold. It was the absence of temperature, the kind of void where heat never existed to begin with. The air tasted metallic. The floorboards beneath my shoes creaked as the entire station seemed to tilt 3 degrees to the left, then 3 degrees back, like reality itself was being rotated by unseen fingers. "Ask yourself," the man in the chair said slowly, "why the station needs one of us to stay, why there can only ever be one." His voice trembled now, barely controlled. Ask yourself why the rules change depending on who reads them. My mind tried to snap to logic, but logic had no place here. Why are there two of us? I asked him, but I didn't need his answer. I already knew, and the realization hollowed me out so completely that my knees locked to keep me standing. There aren't two of us, I whispered. There never were. Behind me, something leaned closer until I felt the air part around my ear as if a mouth were forming a word without sound. The man in the chair nodded slowly, and the grief in that small nod punched through me harder than any terror. The station copies you the moment you enter, he said. Not to create a monster, not to hunt you, but to decide which version of you the rules will accept. He swallowed. The one who survives is the one that follows them best. My vision blurred not from tears, but from something deeper, like the world was erasing details around the edges because I wasn't meant to see them anymore. Then which one am I? I choked out, desperate, pleading for an anchor. His voice cracked. The one that's asking, he said, is usually the one that's already losing. A sharp noise cracked through the air like bone bending past its limit, and the shadow behind me stretched across the floor, growing taller, straighter, sharper. My pulse hammered in my ears, but the presence behind me hummed in perfect sync with it, matching my heartbeat exactly, beat for beat, like a tuning fork syncing to its pair. You can still leave, the not-me said, but the words sounded wrong, too urgent, too hopeful, too unlike the calm inevitability he'd worn earlier. You can walk out that door before sunrise, if it lets you. If it lets me, I echoed, my voice shook. Why wouldn't it? Looked at me with eyes that looked more like mine than my own did now. Because the station doesn't decide with logic, he whispered. It decides with reflection. The presence behind me inched closer, its shadow folded in on itself, creating impossible angles, like elbows bending in directions bones weren't allowed to bend, like joints forming where joints never existed. I clenched the rule card harder, but the letters were crawling across it again, rearranging themselves with slow, surgical precision. New text carved itself into the laminate, glowing faintly beneath the surface. I watched, unable to stop myself. The words formed, one must remain, one must leave, both cannot be real. My stomach turned over. What does that mean? I whispered, but the man in the chair looked away, jaw trembling. He didn't answer, couldn't answer, wouldn't answer. The presence behind me inhaled again, this time deeper, almost like it was smelling me, tasting the outline of who I was. Then it exhaled, and I felt something settling over my shoulders, like a cloak being draped across me, heavy with expectations I didn't understand. Something brushed the back of my neck, fingers, but not mine. My breath hitched. The rule card pulsed once, hard enough to jolt my wrist. The man in the chair stood up slowly, shakily, like he'd aged decades in a single moment. He stepped toward me, eyes wide, voice breaking as he whispered, Elias, don't turn around. Something inside me cracked, not physically, but in the fragile architecture of identity. My name didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. The presence behind me whispered, not with sound, but with pressure, with intent, writing a message directly into the marrow of my bones. You already did. My blood went ice cold. The man in the chair took one final shaky breath and whispered, choose. But the presence behind me whispered the exact same word in my voice. And in that moment, with both voices overlapping, identical, indistinguishable, I finally understood the real question the station had been asking since the beginning. Which one of us do you believe you are? For a moment, nothing in the station moved, not the air, not the lights, not even the shadow behind me, and the stillness felt so absolute, so suffocating, that I wondered if time itself had paused just long enough for the station to watch me think, to savor the moment before the fracture became permanent. Then slowly, the world resumed in tiny, disjointed pieces, like a glitching video buffering on bad signal. A hum here, a flicker there, the faint scratch of something dragging its nails along the underside of the counter, though I wasn't anywhere near the counter anymore, and the realization that sounds were coming from places my body wasn't standing in made my breath stutter in uneven bursts. Not Me stood frozen a few feet away, eyes trembling with a terrible knowledge, and though his chest rose and fell, the rhythm was wrong half a second behind mine, like a shadow trying desperately to sync with something it no longer controlled. It's choosing, he whispered, but the words were barely a thread of sound, more thought than voice. It always comes down to which one doubts first. My heart hammered so violently I thought the station might hear it and use the sound as a verdict. Doubt, that was the trap. That was the mechanism. Whoever doubted their own identity first, lost. I swallowed hard, but the swallow didn't feel aligned with my own throat, like it was echoing, duplicated, performed by someone else in the same body. Behind me, the presence shifted again, a slow, deliberate unfurling of limbs, or what passed for limbs, stretching into the shape of a human silhouette but refusing to fully commit to it, as though it enjoyed hovering between forms, between truths, between selves. The pressure of the entity's breath against my neck deepened, and with it came a sensation like fingers brushing the inside of my skull, sifting through memories with cold detachment. Childhood scenes, faces, old houses, my brother laughing in the passenger seat of his car, my mother calling my name from the kitchen, each memory pulled forward, inspected, then shuffled away like the entity was checking the quality of my life before deciding whether it fit the rules or needed to be erased. My knees nearly buckled. "Stop," I whispered, but the entity answered only by inhaling again, longer this time, as if breathing in my fear like nourishment. The not me took a trembling step closer, raising his hands slowly, carefully, almost pleadingly. "Elias," he said, and my name sounded too heavy in his mouth, as if he was tasting it, remembering it, struggling to keep ownership of it. "Listen to me. This is where it decides which one of us stays real. You have to." He stopped abruptly. His eyes widened. He stared at my hand, the rule card. I followed his gaze. My stomach dropped. The card's edges were fraying, splintering into thin threads of laminate like something beneath the surface was trying to break out. The printed text pulsed again, once, twice, like a heartbeat struggling to push blood through failing veins. "You're holding the card wrong," he whispered, but the warning came too late. The letters on the rule card liquefied, slithering across the surface like ink caught in a magnetic field, rearranging themselves into new commands at a speed my mind couldn't process. I blinked, and 3 new lines had already formed. Identity Rule 9, when the shadow breathes in S. Ink with you, you are no longer the original. Identity Rule 10, the one who hesitates becomes the reflection. Identity Rule 11, if two speak the same name at the same time, the station chooses silence. My lungs seized, my breath hit sharply. Behind me, the entity shifted again, and suddenly its breath matched mine perfectly, not slightly delayed, not slightly off, perfectly. Every inhale, every exhale, every trembling pause. The not me's eyes filled with dread. "Elias," he whispered urgently, "don't breathe. Hold it now." But it was too late. I had already inhaled. The entity inhaled with me. I had already exhaled. It exhaled perfectly in unison. And the rule card pulsed violently like a defibrillator shocking a dying heart, and the laminate cracked down the middle like splitting bone. A high-pitched tone filled the station, too faint to qualify as sound, too sharp to be silence, vibrating straight into the base of my skull. The lights flickered violently once, twice, then steadied, and for the first time the entity behind me moved where I could hear it, not just feel it. A footstep, soft, precise, not monstrous, not inhuman, a footstep exactly like mine. My blood turned to ice. "Elias," the not me said again, stepping forward with a kind of desperate courage that made my throat tighten. "Whatever happens next, do not say your name, do not say anything. Silence is the only thing that keeps you from." He froze. His eyes widened in horror, his mouth moved, but no sound came out. A strangled panic seized him as he clutched at his throat. He tried again and again and again, but nothing emerged except the soft rasp of forced air. The rule card vibrated once more, and I saw it. Identity Rule 11, the one that warned about speaking the same name. He had said Elias. The entity behind me had said Elias, in my voice, perfectly, and because both identities spoke the same name at the same time. The station had chosen silence for him instead. His voice was gone, erased, claimed. He stumbled backward, hands shaking violently, eyes filled with terror as he mouthed words, pleading, begging, warning, but no sound followed. "It took your voice," I whispered before I could stop myself, before I remembered the rule about silence. His eyes locked onto mine, wide with horror, as if trying to scream a warning without sound. Behind me, the entity leaned closer. I felt something brush the top of my shoulder, light, almost gentle, like a hand settling into place. My heart slammed against my ribs hard enough to bruise. The station hummed, the lights dimmed, and in the reflection of the office window I saw 3 silhouettes, one standing, one collapsing, one forming, and mine was the one I could no longer trust. The sight of those 3 silhouettes in the office window, one standing rigid, one sinking to its knees, and one flickering like a figure half-finished, sent a cold spike through my spine, because in that warped reflection the shapes didn't align the way they should have, the angles bending wrong, the shadows overlapping in ways that suggested more than one belonged to the same body. And in that moment I realized the station wasn't simply showing me what was happening. It was showing me the decision forming around me, the way a judge might wet the tip of a quill before writing a name that seals someone's fate. The not me clutched at his throat in silent horror, chest heaving in a desperate fight for sound that would never come again. And when our eyes met, the terror in his expression wasn't only fear, it was recognition. He knew something about the moment that I hadn't fully grasped yet. Behind me, the entity's fingers, if they were fingers, tightened slightly on my shoulder, the gentlest shift of pressure, but weighted with an ownership that made my skin crawl. It didn't hurt, that somehow made it worse. It felt calm, like it had been waiting for this contact, like it had rehearsed it across 1,000 previous shifts. The station hummed again, long and low, as though the building itself exhaled in satisfaction. My pulse thrashed. Why him? I whispered before remembering I shouldn't speak, but the question slipped out anyway, thin, hoarse, coated with dread. The not me flinched. The entity behind me inhaled slow, deep, savoring the slip of my voice. And the rule card in my hand cracked again, a thin splinter racing across the laminate surface like a fracture spreading through bone. New words bled across it like veins filling with ink. Identity Rule 12, the one who speaks after silence is already surrendering. My legs nearly gave out. I didn't mean, I began, but stopped, clamping my mouth shut just in time to avoid another mistake. The not me staggered forward, reaching toward me, shaking his head violently as he mouthed stop, 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 but the entity's grip on my shoulder tightened again, and suddenly he froze mid-motion as though caught in invisible cement. His body went unnaturally still, like a pup. T with the strings cut, but his eyes stayed alive, wide, frantic, begging me not to do whatever the next step was. But I didn't know the next step. God, that was the horror. I didn't know the rules anymore. The station had moved past the printed ones, past the written ones, and was now forming rules directly from my actions, judging me in real time for hesitations I couldn't control, decisions I couldn't understand. The lights dimmed further, shadows lengthening across the floor like spilled ink. The entity leaned closer until its head was almost level with mine, and though I couldn't see its face, I could feel the hollow space where eyes should be, an absence so complete it felt like gravity bending the air around it. A whisper touched my ear, not sound, but intention. Look, just that one word, but the meaning hit me like ice water. It was telling me to turn toward the office glass, to see which silhouette matched me, to acknowledge which one I truly was. And I knew with a dread so deep it felt like the bottom of a well that the moment I looked, really looked, one of us would stop being real. My breath caught and the entity inhaled with me, still perfectly synced. My heartbeat pounded in my ears and the entity's presence pulsed with each beat, matching rhythm for rhythm, pulse for pulse, identity for identity. The not me shook his head harder, tears forming in his eyes as he mouthed over and over, don't look, don't look, don't look, but how could I not? My vision drifted involuntarily toward the office window, toward those three silhouettes, one tall and rigid, one crumpled and silent, one flickering like a half-built reflection. And as I stared, the flickering silhouette began stabilizing, smoothing into clearer form, matching my height, my posture, my stance. The sinking silhouette, the one kneeling, looked like a distorted version of me in the moments I had panicked earlier. And the rigid one, the tallest, didn't match me at all. It was too elongated. Too straight, too wrong. My throat tightened, my breath hitched, and the entity behind me exhaled a wordless vibration of satisfaction, as if pleased I was beginning to doubt myself. Doubt, that was the weapon, the mechanism. The station didn't kill, it selected. Whoever questioned who they were first, who hesitated, became the reflection, the copy, the echo left behind to rot in the fluorescent half-light. My fingers trembled around the rule card, and another new line of text formed beneath the others, slower this time, like the station was savoring carving the words. Identity Rule 13, the real one does not need proof. A shiver tore through me. If that was true, then the moment I looked to the glass for proof, I had already lost. The flickering silhouette steadied more. My breath hitched. The entity behind me inhaled that hitch like stolen oxygen. The not me slammed a fist silently against his own throat in a desperate, silent scream as tears streamed down his face, because he understood the rule before I did, understood that the moment I doubted myself enough to seek the reflection, I had already stopped. The thought slammed into me like a spine snapping. I squeezed my eyes shut. I forced every muscle in my body to freeze. I would not look, I would not turn, I would not acknowledge the reflection as fact. Not yet, not ever. The station hummed low, displeased, like a predator denied its instinctive kill. The presence behind me shifted slightly, confused, adjusting. The lights flickered. The not me stared at me with wide, terrified eyes, realizing I had resisted the most dangerous part of the identity trap, the urge to seek proof of reality. The entity leaned closer, breath hollow, pressure cold, and for the first time it hesitated. That hesitation was the first and only sign it could be outmaneuvered. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe, I didn't look, and the station, feeling the fracture in its decision, went still, the entire building holding its breath like reality was waiting for my next mistake. The station's silence thickened around me like wet concrete, heavy and waiting, and in that suffocating stillness I realized the entity wasn't backing away. It was recalculating, shifting its rules, rewriting the boundaries of what counted as a decision, because I had broken its pattern and it didn't like that, not even a little. Behind my eyelids I felt the air bend, the temperature drop, the pressure around my skull tightening like invisible hands trying to force my face toward the glass, toward the reflections, toward the trap I had refused to fall into, and for a moment the entire gas station felt alive, aware, irritated that I had not yet chosen the role it had prepared for me. The floor beneath my boots shuddered once, then twice, like footsteps approaching through the foundation itself, and the not me in the office window pounded his fist against the inside of the glass again, not with panic now, but with urgency, as though something worse was approaching behind H. I am something the reflections could see but I could not, and his mouth formed the words it's deciding, it's deciding, it's deciding, over and over without sound, tears streaking down his face, shoulders heaving silently like he was begging me to do something, anything, before the choice solidified. The entity behind me leaned closer, and the shape of its presence shifted, no longer imitating breath, no longer matching my pulse, but instead vibrating with a low, humming anticipation like a machine preparing to finalize a selection. The rule card cracked again, a jagged line running straight across the laminated surface, and more words bled into existence so slowly it felt like they were being carved into the card with a dull blade. Identity Rule 14, indecision is a choice. My stomach flipped, my jaw clenched. A thin, cold trickle of fear slid down my spine because the implication was clear. Standing still too long meant the station would choose for me, and whatever it chose would become reality. I didn't know if stepping forward would doom me. I didn't know if stepping backward would doom me. I didn't know if speaking would seal my identity or erase it. I only knew that every option, every movement, every breath was now part of the judgment, and that the entity behind me was ready to pounce the moment I hesitated the wrong way. My fingers twitched around the rule card, and the entity leaned in sharply, reacting to the twitch as though it were a confession. I froze again, pulse thundering, and the station lights buzzed overhead, not flickering this time, but brightening unnaturally, as though illuminating a stage for a final act. The not me slammed his palms against the glass one last time, eyes huge, pleading, and then, slowly, terribly, his reflection began to darken around the edges, like the silhouette was being filled in with ink from the outside inward, devoured by shadow, and his expression collapsed into pure, voiceless horror because that was the consequence. Whichever version of me the station decided wasn't real would be swallowed whole, erased, replaced, or worse, left conscious but voiceless inside the reflection world, trapped beneath fluorescent lights and gas station hum for eternity, unable to scream, unable to speak, unable to exist except as a warning for the next unlucky night shift worker. A tremor ran through my legs. I forced them still. The entity's pressure increased against my back, a cold mimicry of a hand urging me forward, and for a split second I felt the intention. Look now, let me decide. And my mind locked like a claw around the only thought that mattered. If I look, I lose. If I turned my head even by an inch, the station would take that as permission. So I didn't move, not a muscle, not a breath. The lights brightened further, humming so loud the air vibrated, and the entity leaned until its face, or whatever hollow space acted as its face, hovered just behind my left ear, waiting for me to twitch again. The rule card cracked completely in half. Both pieces fell from my hand, hitting the floor with two soft taps that echoed like gunshots in the unnatural quiet, and then everything changed. A sound like a metal latch snapping open rang out, sharp and final, and the air pressure shifted again, this time behind me, not in front. A door creaked, slowly, very slowly. Behind the checkout counter, the employee's only door, one I knew had been locked my entire shift, swung inward, revealing nothing but a deep, black hallway that did not belong in any gas station built by human hands. Cool air spilled out, carrying the faint smell of old concrete, damp soil, and something metallic, the exact scent of the tunnel from my earlier nightmares, a corridor I had never walked but somehow recognized instantly. The entity withdrew from my back like a tide pulling away from shore, not leaving but repositioning, its weight shifting toward the open doorway like it was preparing to lead me, or drag me through it. The not me slammed his fists against the glass again, harder, wild with desperation now, and though I couldn't hear a sound, I saw his lips form the word run. But run where, run how? If I turned, would that count as looking? If I stayed still, would the station decide I belonged in the darkness behind that door? The air around me thickened, the hum rising, vibrating through my bones. Then a voice, soft, close, wrong, whispering inches from my right ear. But this time, it sounded exactly like me. Choose something, Ilias. A cold tremor rolled through my chest, because I hadn't told the entity my name, not once. And hearing it now spoken in my own voice felt like something reaching into the shape of my identity, testing its edges, probing for cracks. The lights flickered violently, the reflections in the office window blurred into unrecognizable shapes, the doorway behind me pulsed with deeper darkness, and the ground vibrated like the entire station was about to fold inward. I could tell which way was safety. I couldn't tell which me was real. I couldn't tell whether silence saved me or damned me. All I knew was this: I had to move, some direction, any direction, before the station made the choice for me. I inhaled once, shaky, terrified, and stepped forward, backward, toward the glass, toward the door. I honestly don't know, because the instant my boot hit the floor, everything went white. No sound, no breath, no station, no reflection, just a single blinding flash of nothing. And then I was standing outside, morning light, highway wind, a crow calling in the distance. My car keys in my hand, my uniform smelling like gasoline. I was outside, alive, free maybe. Behind the station window, a silhouette stood watching me. My height, my shape, my stance, but I didn't check twice. I didn't look long enough to see if it blinked. If you made it this far, don't leave me alone with whatever that thing was. Tell me in the comments, would you have followed the rules or tried to break them? And if you want another night shift story, subscribe before the lights flicker. I'll know if you don't.